Welcome to your market brief for Monday, November 25th from the NASDAQ market site. The Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 set to open a shortened holiday week higher as investors continue to watch Hong Kong following the election results. Plus, it's M&A Monday as LVMH buys Tiffany for $16.2 billion and Charles Schwab acquires TD Ameritrade in a $26 billion stock swap. Plus, Uber loses its license in London. With that, we'll also have our eye on key U.S. reports, including new home sales for October and consumer confidence for November. And earnings season winds down with a few big names reporting quarterly results this week, including Palo Alto, Best Buy, Dollar Tree, HP, and John Deere. Now, as investors search for fresh opportunities before the end of the year, let's shift our focus to cannabis. Overall, it's been a brutal run for the industry. Just look at these red arrows. Canopy Growth down 31%, Aurora down 46%, and Tilray down 69% year to date. However, our next guest remains extremely bullish. Bruce Linton, former CEO of Canopy Growth, is here. We're also joined by Bill Alpert, Barron's senior writer who covers the cannabis industry extensively. Welcome to both of you. All right, so Bruce, let's start with you. We're going to pull up a chart of Canopy Growth since your departure. So in early July, Canopy was trading at $41 a share. Then you were, let's call it like it is, you were terminated.
Yes.
You were fired.
Yes.
Shares sank.
Yes.
You bought some more.
Yes.
And shares since then, as of Friday, it's down 56%, trading around $18 a share. Ouch. Any regrets about scooping up some shares at what you thought were pretty cheap levels? And why are you still so upbeat on this?
Well, so I bought enough that I could have bought a pretty nice Tesla. And, you know, I wish in some ways I had a Tesla because I'm pretty big on the truck. But what I was trying to do is signal to the market that they should pay attention to the future. Because I think that what's happening in Canada is it's a small market. It's not, you don't want to be in Canada, you want to be from Canada. But what Canopy's been working on when I was running the place was how do we create intellectual property that's going to have products that people stand in line for? Because right now the conversation is about ingredients. People say CBD, THC. Nobody wants those ingredients. What they want is an outcome. They want something that's socially normal. They can actually get a medicinal effect or a recreational effect, and it doesn't have to be combusted. And so I think Canopy's front of the line for that kind of platform. And when I look at the space, it's still the beginning. Really, the US stocks have probably traded down just as bad or worse, and the market's forming very nice in the US. Canopy has a great exposure through acreage to the US.
So what do you think is going to make these stocks move back up?
Couple of things. One is, in the case of Canopy, whether or not I was the right person to run it, I think I was, but I wasn't in charge of deciding that. When they pick somebody to run it, that'll help. Because capital markets tend to not like an absence of information. And so who's running a company is a big deal. In the market overall, I think the 2020 run-up, if I were running here, I would actually focus on a states' rights type of decision that says if you're having a party in California and recreational, that's fine. But if you have other states which dislike cannabis, that's fine. And so as you guys lean into the election, this is a topic that polls really well. I think it's actually going to have clarity on both parties that they're not opposed to it. How they're going to manage it will come out. That's going to rock the markets up.
All right, well, we'll talk about legalization here in just a bit, but you had mentioned, obviously, U.S. and Canada. Canada had all the money and no impediments, yet is struggling. The U.S., meanwhile, is booming. What's, I guess, Canada doing wrong, or why are they having such a hard time selling something that's seemingly or obviously so popular?
So the federal level has had a program by which you could be a medical patient since 2001. Last year, they started a recreational program, but the states had the authority of sales. So each state had a different methodology by which they would open stores or not. And so what you found is some of the biggest states, like Ontario, did not have any stores the day it opened and now has 24 for the biggest population. Smaller ones like Alberta have over 200, almost 300 for a third of the population. So the unevenness, but they're catching up. So what happens is if retail isn't visible and doesn't exist, you know, we're going to load in the car, like, hey, let's get in the car, pack a lunch, we're going to drive 4 hours and buy cannabis. That is not going to happen. It's going to be, let's go to the guy in the puffy coat. And so I think what you find is the retail experience both was in sort of boring products, smokable, simple gel caps, and not very common. In January, a whole bunch of new products are going to be available, and as the stores are more numerous, I think you're going to see it ramp up. But remember, this is still a small population country, What you should be looking for is, have they created products that could go elsewhere?
So the CBD in the US was supposed to be a huge thing, but the large retailers aren't stocking it as a food or a beverage yet. What's holding them back?
Well, it's a, hemp as a crop, you can now harvest. You can farm it. But who regulates how much? If you say CBD, can you say how many milligrams? And can you make a claim? So the FDA has some role in there. And I think that uncertainty means bankers, retailers, others don't want to put products on the shelf that are they going to go offside with the FDA? Do we know that the people making them actually have quality control? Back when I was running Canopy, we looked at quite a strong array, a big mixture of these products. And I think about 80% of them were mislabeled, meaning they were more than 10% over or under the number of milligrams. And so if you're running big retail, you want actually the same product in stock, in inventory forever. You want to know what's it supposed to do, and that there's not going to be any kind of side effects or adverse reactions. If there are, they're listed. I don't think the nature of the supply chain is yet sufficiently, I'll call it, stable to make all big retailers comfortable with it. And as a consumer, okay, great, you got CBD in it. Should it make me less nervous? Should it make me have a better response to working out? Should I have a beverage when I work out, before I work out, during my workout, or after? How many milligrams have to be in that beverage so I don't actually have pain after my workout? All those things are unknowns.
All right, I want to ask you about legalization, because this is important to you still, because you just recently signed as chairman of a small U.S. cannabis operator. But if the U.S. House passes a legalization bill, highly probable that they might, what's the likelihood that the Republican-controlled Senate will actually pass it?
I think what it does is it keeps inching forward. So now what we're talking about is one party leading the discussion on how to manage something, because legalization isn't actually a big deal. What it is it's a government saying we're going to quit ignoring. And what we're going to do is we're going to regulate, we're going to monetize, and we're going to educate. And so I think most people would expect governments to regulate, monetize, and educate. And so they're going to find a framework that will balance. And I still think states' rights allows the feds to allow the states to be in charge and doesn't get friction with the states that disagree. But has there been a week this year? There wasn't a discussion or a debate about how do we manage this topic. And it polls really well, right? Like, I think depending on medical versus rec, medical is what, 70? I think medical polls better in Canada, or in the US than Canada. 70%-ish are in favor of a medical regime, where in Canada, the overall polling is like 50, 60%.
Well, let's talk about polls, because we want to turn to the results of our MarketWatch poll. We asked viewers how they're positioned within the world of public cannabis companies. More than half of participants stated that they were not investing yet. Are they making a mistake, Bruce?
Well, it's kind of hard, right? If you're in the U.S. and you say, well, I really like Vireo, so that's one of the companies I'm involved with. How do you buy that stock? Well, it's kind of listed on this Canadian Securities Exchange. My broker doesn't even know how the heck to buy a stock up in Canada. So I think it's keeping a bunch of people on the sideline. But I do think they're making a mistake on missing the U.S. and some selected Canadian. Like, you don't want to buy an ETF for Canada because there's going to be a bottom fallout of people who are just farmers. But you need to selectively analyze and say which ones will have products I would stand in line to buy in Canada. And in the U.S., you should look at and say, which states are they in? Do they have the ones? Because I don't want to be in the states like California's a great story, but it's all done, right? There's a zillion producers, et cetera, and it's a big problem. I'd be looking at ones that are about to flip. So I'm involved with one in Michigan. Why? Michigan is like, I think it's going to be a great branding opportunity where instead of thinking about a blonde-haired person driving a Volkswagen product, think about somebody in Michigan driving, a Michigan-made car, and that their hair is not blonde, and there's a storyboard about cannabis that fits to their world. And so I think there's a great transition from medical to rec that comes from a geography which has been kind of at the edge. And so I really do think you should look at where are they if they're a multi-state operator. And so in the case of Gage, they're in that state, and I'm disinterested in places that are super oversupplied. I want tight regulation, limited number, and great governance.
All right, we have to leave it there, but Bruce, we really appreciate your insights. And finally, with the holiday shopping season nearly upon us, the National Retail Federation is anticipating total sales of around $729 billion. That would represent a 4% rise from last season, despite fewer days to shop. With that, take part in our new MarketWatch poll. Are you spending more, less, or the same as you did last year, if you can remember? We want to know. Thanks so much for watching. Comment below and let us know what questions you'd like us to touch on in the world of retail. But here's a question for you. Will the holiday season be a boon for beatdown retailers? We'll be right here every Monday on the MarketWatch YouTube channel with everything you'll need to get the week started.